The laughter hit first. Sharp, cruel, uncontrolled. It sliced through the grand marble hall like broken glass. Hundreds of guests, dressed in silk gowns, tailored tuxedos, and diamond-encrusted smiles, stood frozen in half-circles, watching as the moment unraveled in real time. Chandeliers glittered above, reflecting gold and white light across the polished floor of the luxury estate. White roses lined the aisle. A string quartet trembled into silence. And right there, at the center of it all, stood three black women dressed modestly but beautifully, clutching their purses as if they were shields. One of them lowered her head. Another's hands shook. The youngest, barely in her mid-20s, stood perfectly still, her spine straight, her face calm, but her eyes burning. Did someone forget to tell them this was a private wedding? A man scoffed loudly from the front row. More laughter erupted. A woman in a champagne-colored gown leaned toward her friend and whispered, far too loudly, "Honestly, I thought this was a charity event when I saw them walk in." The bride's cousin let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Security must be asleep. You can spot outsiders from a mile away." Every word landed like a slap. The women had done nothing wrong. They weren't loud. They weren't disruptive. They hadn't even spoken. They had simply taken their seats in the third row, and now they were being hunted with eyes. One of the women, the oldest, finally looked up. Her voice was soft but steady. "We were invited." That was all she said. The reaction was immediate. "Oh my God," the bride's brother laughed, clapping sarcastically. "Did you hear that? Invited." The antagonist stepped forward then. Marcus Whitfield, best man, family golden child. A man who wore arrogance the way others wore cologne. He straightened his cufflinks slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the moment. "Let me make this very clear," Marcus said, his voice smooth and cutting. "This is a high-profile wedding. Politicians, military officers, executives, people who belong." He looked the women up and down. "And you don't." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The bride shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Marcus took another step closer, invading their space. "Now I don't know who told you that you could come here," he continued, voice dripping with condescension, "but I suggest you leave quietly before this gets embarrassing." The youngest woman finally spoke. Her voice didn't shake. "We are embarrassed," she said calmly. "Not for ourselves, for you." That should have been the end, but Marcus smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "Oh, sweetheart," he chuckled. "You should have just kept quiet." He snapped his fingers. Two security guards began moving down the aisle. The music stopped completely. Every eye turned. The humiliation was total. The older woman whispered, "Baby, it's okay." The youngest shook her head once. "No, it's not." Marcus raised his voice so the entire hall could hear. "Escort them out. I won't have my cousin's wedding ruined by people who clearly don't understand their place." That word echoed, place. As the guards reached them, one of the women's heels slipped slightly on the marble floor. Someone laughed. Another guest pulled out a phone. The shame was unbearable. And then the massive oak doors at the back of the hall swung open. A single heavy footstep echoed, then another. The guards froze. Marcus turned, irritated. "What now?" A man in a formal military dress uniform stepped into the light. His posture was rigid. His medals gleamed. His presence alone silenced the room. Whispers rippled instantly. "Is that? No way. What is he doing here?" The bride's face drained of color. Marcus blinked, confused. The man didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at the guests. He walked straight down the aisle, past the stunned crowd, past the frozen guards, and stopped directly in front of the youngest black woman. The room held its breath. Then the groom turned sharply on his heel. Boots clicked together, his back snapped straight, and in one flawless motion he raised his hand to his brow. A perfect, crisp, unmistakable command salute. The sound of fabric snapping echoed through the hall. Gasps turned into stunned silence. Marcus's mouth fell open. The bride staggered back. The guard stepped away immediately. The groom's voice rang out clear, firm, and shaking with emotion. "Ma'am," he said, still saluting, "it is an honor to have you here." You could hear a pin drop. The youngest woman finally exhaled. Slowly, she met his eyes, and in that moment every single person in the room realized something was terribly, disastrously wrong. Marcus swallowed hard. What is this?" he whispered. The groom turned his head just enough to glance at Marcus. His eyes were ice. "You will address her properly," he said. The hall seemed to tilt. Marcus took a step back. "Properly?" he scoffed weakly. She's just—" The groom cut him off. "She is the reason I'm standing here today," he said coldly. "She is the reason I wear this uniform, and she is the last person you should have ever disrespected." Silence, pure, suffocating silence. The youngest woman's hands clenched slowly at her sides. Her secret, their secret, was about to come out. And Marcus had no idea what he had just done. Question of the day: have you ever been judged, mocked, or underestimated just because of how you look or where you come from? Tell us your story in the comments below and let us know where you're watching from today. But before we see how this ends, let's go back to where this story truly began, 3 months earlier, long before the chandeliers, long before the laughter, long before the command salute that shattered an entire wedding hall. The day began in a small, quiet house on the edge of Savannah, Georgia. The paint on the porch was chipped. The mailbox leaned slightly to the left. But the windows were clean, the steps were swept, and a small American flag hung neatly by the door, folded with care every night and raised again every morning. Inside, Naomi Carter stood at the kitchen counter, tying her hair back into a low bun. She was 48 years old, tall, composed, and carried herself with a kind of calm authority that never needed to raise its voice. Years of discipline had shaped her posture. Years of loss had shaped her eyes. Behind her, 2 younger women sat at the small dining table. One was Renee, Naomi's older sister, warm, expressive, and fiercely protective. The other was Aisha, Naomi's daughter, the same young woman who would later stand frozen under the weight of mockery at that wedding. Aisha watched her mother carefully. "You don't have to go, Mom," she said quietly. "We can make an excuse." Naomi smiled softly without turning around. "No," she replied. "When you're invited somewhere with honesty, you show up with dignity, always." Renee snorted. "Dignity doesn't stop people from being cruel." Naomi finally turned, leaning back against the counter. "Cruelty says more about them than us," she said gently. "And besides, this isn't just any wedding." Aisha hesitated. "Marcus doesn't want us there." Naomi nodded. "I know." That was the problem. Marcus Whitfield had never hidden his contempt. From the first moment he met Naomi years ago, he'd looked at her the same way people look at something that doesn't belong where it is, polite on the surface, resentful underneath. And now his cousin Daniel Whitfield was getting married. Daniel had insisted Naomi attend, personally, repeatedly. "You saved my life," he'd told her once, his voice heavy with memory. "You're family to me whether my blood relatives like it or not." Naomi hadn't answered then. She rarely spoke about the past, but the past had a way of showing up anyway. Who Naomi Carter really was to the outside world, Naomi Carter was unremarkable. She worked as a high school guidance counselor. She lived modestly. She drove a 10-year-old sedan. She never talked about her accomplishments. But there was a reason she woke up at 5:00 a.m. every day. A reason she folded the flag with reverence. A reason her voice carried quiet command even when she whispered. Naomi Carter was a retired U.S. Army major, 22 years of service, multiple overseas deployments, a Bronze Star she never mentioned, a medical discharge she never complained about, and one classified incident that changed everything. She had been the commanding officer of a joint operation unit overseas, an operation that went catastrophically wrong. Ambushed. Surrounded. Communications cut. Most of her units survived because of one decision she made under impossible pressure. One soldier in particular owed her his life. That soldier was Daniel Whitfield. But the military wasn't the only battlefield Naomi had fought on. After returning home injured, she faced a different war, single motherhood. Aisha had been 8 years old when Naomi came home for good. No parade, no recognition, just a mother relearning how to be present. She worked nights, studied counseling, built a life brick by brick. She taught Aisha 2 things above all else. 1, never let bitterness shape your heart. 2, never let anyone define your worth. And yet, she knew exactly how the world treated women like them. Why this day mattered. The wedding invitation arrived in a thick ivory envelope. Handwritten, Daniel's handwriting. Naomi stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a simple note: "I wouldn't be here without you. Please stand with me on the most important day of my life." She folded it carefully and placed it in the kitchen drawer where she kept old photographs and military commendations. She hadn't wanted to go, not because she feared humiliation, but because she knew it was coming. Marcus had made that clear during their last phone call. "This wedding isn't the place for political statements," Marcus had said sharply. "I'm not one," Naomi replied calmly. Marcus scoffed. "Let's just say some guests might feel uncomfortable." Naomi paused. "And perhaps they should examine why." The line went dead. Still, Daniel insisted. And for Naomi, this day was bigger than a wedding. It was about closure. It was about showing Aisha, without speeches or lectures, that you don't shrink yourself to make others comfortable. It was about standing in the light without apology. The morning of the wedding, the 3 women got ready together. No stylists, no designers, just quiet laughter and steady hands. Aisha wore a deep blue dress, simple, elegant, understated. You look beautiful, Naomi said, adjusting her daughter's necklace. Aisha smiled nervously. Do you think they'll stare? Naomi met her eyes in the mirror. Let them, she said. We don't borrow confidence from others, we bring our own. Renee slipped on her heels. If anyone says something out of line, I'm not staying quiet. Naomi smiled. I know. They drove to the venue in silence. As the grand estate appeared in the distance, white columns, iron gates, manicured lawns, Aisha's stomach tightened. This place doesn't feel like it's meant for us, she whispered. Naomi reached over and squeezed her hand. Then it's about time it learned better. What Naomi didn't know what Naomi didn't know, what none of them knew was that Daniel had made a decision of his own. He had requested to wear his formal military uniform during the ceremony, not for tradition, not for show, but for honor. Because there was one thing the world respected even when it failed to respect black women: rank. And Daniel was prepared to use it. As they stepped through the front doors of the venue, conversation dipped. Eyes turned, judgment arrived instantly, and somewhere near the altar Marcus Whitfield noticed them. His jaw tightened. Unbelievable, he muttered. He straightened his jacket and began walking toward them. Naomi felt it before she saw it, the familiar tightening in the air that always came before confrontation. She inhaled slowly, steady, prepared. Because she hadn't survived war zones just to be undone by ignorance. The grand doors of the estate closed softly behind Naomi, Aisha, and Renee, but the air inside was already thick with tension. The polished marble floors reflected the chandeliers above, making the space feel even larger, more intimidating. The guests were buzzing, subtle whispers escalating into audible murmurs. Eyes followed every step of the three women, some curious, others judging. But the harshest gaze of all belonged to one man, Marcus Whitfield. Marcus was perched near the front, adjusting his cufflinks with meticulous care. His lips curved into the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, an expression built from superiority, entitlement, and decades of privilege. When his gaze fell on Naomi and her companions, that smile transformed instantly into something far more sinister. Well, well, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for the guest beside him to hear. I thought I told them to stay away. As Naomi walked toward the reserved seats, every step deliberate, she felt the stares piercing her back like invisible daggers. The whispers around her grew louder. Didn't even belong in the first place, someone murmured. Out of place, another agreed. Did you see their clothes? Completely inappropriate for this setting. Aisha flinched slightly. Naomi's hand brushed hers. Ignore them, Naomi whispered. Confidence doesn't borrow from anyone. Let them see our presence, that's all they'll ever get. The women reached the third row, hesitated, and sat. As they did, a wave of audible scoffing washed over the room. Marcus didn't wait, he descended upon them like a storm, exuding the arrogance that had defined him since childhood. Excuse me, he said, voice low but sharp. You're in the wrong place. Naomi tilted her head slightly, calm, unshaken. We were invited, she said evenly. The words were like a spark. The room's atmosphere shifted. Gasps echoed, people leaned in, eager to see how this would unfold. Marcus laughed, cold, sharp, and cruel. Invited, he repeated, the word dripping with mockery. By whom? I highly doubt my cousin had any idea you were coming. He took a step closer, towering over Aisha. His presence felt suffocating. Now I'll make this simple for you, Marcus continued. This is a wedding for people who understand social standing, people who know where they belong, people like me, and people like you. He paused, scanning the three women with a cruel smile. Well, you're here by mistake. Don't make it worse for everyone else. Aisha's jaw tightened. Naomi's eyes locked on Marcus, the kind of steady gaze born from years of leadership in life or death situations. Renee, never one to stay quiet when someone crossed the line, leaned forward, her voice trembling slightly with controlled fury. You don't get to decide where we belong. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Oh, you think this is about me? He said with venom. This is about respect. This is about tradition, something you obviously lack. The words cut. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some were glancing at Marcus with unease, but no one dared challenge him. The power imbalance was too clear, the hierarchy too rigid. Naomi felt the walls closing in, yet she refused to shrink. Marcus gestured toward the security guards posted near the doors. Escort them out, he said firmly. The guards began moving toward Naomi, Renee, and Aisha. Their steps were deliberate, their faces blank, but the intimidation was palpable. Naomi stood, her back straight, shoulders squared. Aisha did the same. You will not touch us, Naomi said, her voice calm but iron strong. One guard hesitated. Marcus's gaze flicked to him. Do as I say, he commanded. The guard nodded reluctantly, advancing. Then something shifted. A hush swept the crowd as a new presence filled the room, silent yet commanding. All attention diverted instinctively to the grand doors at the back. The heavy oak doors opened. 1, 2, 3 steps and a man appeared. Daniel Whitfield, the groom, dressed in full formal military uniform. His medals caught the chandelier light, glinting like flames. Every eye followed him, every whisper fading into a tense silence. Marcus straightened, irritation flickering across his face. "What now?" he muttered. Daniel didn't answer. His gaze was fixed firmly on Naomi. Step by step, he closed the distance between them. The room seemed to shrink around him. Guests shuffled back slightly, unsure what was happening. "Sir," one of the security guards whispered nervously. Daniel ignored them, stopping directly in front of Aisha, who had been frozen with shock and growing awe. He raised his right hand, a crisp, precise military command salute. The sound of fabric snapping and the sharpness of the motion filled the hall. It wasn't just a salute, it was a declaration, a recognition, a reminder of rank, respect, and history. "Ma'am," Daniel said, voice ringing out so clearly every guest could hear, "it is an honor to have you here." The room froze, the laughter died in midair. Marcus blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. "She," Marcus started, stammering. "She who what?" Daniel's gaze met his fully, ice met fire. "You will address her properly," he said, the words slicing through Marcus like a blade. The shift in the room was instantaneous. Whispers ceased. Even the murmurs of disapproval turned into astonishment. Faces drained of color. The guests realized, finally, that this wasn't just a random intrusion. Naomi wasn't merely a guest. She wasn't just Aisha's mother. She carried a history Marcus couldn't even begin to comprehend. Marcus's jaw went slack. His voice was barely audible. I don't," Daniel interrupted sharply. "She is the reason I stand here today. She is the reason I wear this uniform. She is the last person anyone should ever humiliate." Naomi's lips pressed together, a small, almost imperceptible smile forming. Aisha's hands unclenched slightly. Even Renee exhaled a long, quiet breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The humiliation that Marcus had intended to impose upon them had been reversed in an instant. And yet the confrontation wasn't over. Marcus stepped back, attempting to regain composure, but it was futile. The crowd's energy had shifted entirely. Where moments ago there had been mockery, now there was awe and silent questioning. His arrogance, once a shield, had been pierced. Daniel lowered his hand from the salute, eyes never leaving Marcus. "Do you understand now?" he asked, voice low but deadly. Marcus shook his head weakly, pale with the sudden realization of his mistake. Sweat glistened on his forehead. I. Naomi's gaze softened slightly as she stepped forward. Calm, authoritative, and unmistakably in control. "Marcus," she said, voice steady, commanding yet without malice, "respect is earned, not assumed, and certainly not stolen from those who have given everything." The air between them was thick with tension, disbelief, and a simmering reckoning. Guests watched in silence, unsure whether to cheer, gasp, or faint. For Naomi, Aisha, and Renee, the moment wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, recognition, and finally standing without apology in the face of arrogance and prejudice. Marcus's face twisted from anger to fear to realization in seconds. He had misjudged them completely. He had failed to see Naomi not as a black woman, not as an outsider, but as someone whose life had shaped the very men he relied upon and underestimated. And the room now understood what he did not. The game had changed. Marcus's power held no weight here. His insults, his commands, his arrogance, they were meaningless against truth and honor. The stage was set for the ultimate reveal, the moment where the full weight of Naomi Carter's life and history would crush the false superiority Marcus clung to. The room was suspended in a strange, electric silence. Marcus Whitfield, once the self-assured king of the wedding hall, now trembled with disbelief. His carefully constructed facade of superiority was crumbling in front of everyone he considered beneath him. Every eye was on Naomi, yet she did not move a muscle. Her composure was total, as if she had been waiting for this moment all her life. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice low, commanding, resonant with authority. "Everyone, please." The guests turned, waiting for clarification, for the explanation that would undo this impossible scene. Daniel's gaze softened slightly as he turned fully to Naomi. "This is Naomi Carter," he said, "my mother." The words hit the hall like a thunderclap. Guests gasped. Some whispered in shock, others audibly squeaked in surprise. Cameras in phones raised instinctively. Everyone looked to Naomi, whose calm expression betrayed nothing, but whose presence now carried a weight that no one could ignore. Marcus Whitfield froze. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He stumbled backward slightly, the arrogance completely gone from his posture. Mother," he stammered. "Yes," Naomi said, her voice steady, firm, yet filled with undeniable dignity. "The woman you just tried to humiliate is the mother of the groom, the woman who raised him, who taught him everything he knows about honor, discipline, and respect." Gasps cascaded through the room. A few guests covered their mouths, others muttered. I didn't know." Marcus's face turned pale, his fists clenched at his sides, trembling slightly. He could feel every inch of the floor beneath him slipping away. All the insults he had thrown, all the laughter he had unleashed, it came crashing back at him in one incomprehensible wave of shame. Daniel took a single step forward, still in full military regalia. He saluted Naomi again, this time with even more emphasis, demonstrating to everyone present the depth of respect he had for her. "She's the reason I am here today in this uniform. She's the reason I am a man of honor. And she's the reason you, Marcus, have just been shown your place. Not by me, not by this crowd, but by her." The weight of those words settled heavily in the hall. Marcus's bravado had been replaced by the raw realization that he had been publicly exposed, powerless to undo what he had done. Naomi took a slow step forward. She addressed the entire room, her voice commanding attention. "I have served my country. I have led soldiers into battle. I have saved lives in situations that would terrify anyone. And I have done all of this while raising a child who has become a man of integrity, courage, and honor. This is not a wedding where anyone decides who belongs. This is a celebration of love, family, and respect." The silence in the room was profound. The guests were frozen, many trying to reconcile the image of the humble, elegant woman in front of them with the truth of her military career and formidable presence. Marcus attempted to speak, but Naomi's eyes held him in place. She could see every flicker of fear, every bead of sweat forming at his temples, every shred of arrogance leaving his body. "Marcus," she said, slow and deliberate, "you have humiliated women who were invited guests. You have belittled family members who have supported and loved you, and you have tried to assert dominance where you have no authority. This ends now." Marcus swallowed hard, shaking. He opened his mouth again, but no words came. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he was utterly powerless in the face of truth and honor. Daniel stepped forward, placing a hand on his mother's shoulder. He turned slightly, addressing the crowd. "Naomi Carter is more than my mother. She is a decorated army major. She is a leader, a guide, a protector. She has earned the respect of this nation, and she has earned my respect more than anyone else in this room." The guests reacted instantly. Some clapped quietly, others stood to offer standing ovations. The initial whispers of judgment turned into awe-filled murmurs. Marcus's mind raced. He tried to salvage something, anything. I did," he stuttered, but even he could see the futility. His voice barely carried over the murmur of stunned guests. Naomi's gaze shifted from Marcus to Aisha and Renee, softening for a moment. "Do not fear them. Fear has no place where integrity resides," she said gently. "Aisha, Renee, you have nothing to apologize for. Your presence here is not an accident. You belong because respect and dignity are not optional, they are deserved." Aisha's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in her young life, she felt completely safe, completely seen, completely proud. Marcus's mouth opened again, but Naomi interrupted with the subtle but unmistakable authority that had once commanded entire battalions overseas. "No further words," she said firmly. "Your lesson has been made clear." In that moment, Marcus Whitfield's world collapsed. Every ounce of control he had ever wielded had evaporated. The guests were no longer laughing. The power hierarchy had shifted irreversibly. Naomi stepped aside, allowing Daniel and Aisha to take center stage. The groom extended his hand to his mother, and together they walked to their seats. The room's tension melted into a wave of realization and respect, leaving Marcus standing alone, a stark reminder of arrogance undone by honor. The final, undeniable blow came from Daniel, who addressed Marcus once more. "You will not forget this moment, not because we wanted to humiliate you, but because you need to understand that respect cannot be assumed. It must be earned. And in this room today, you have earned nothing but shame." Marcus's face had gone pale, his lips pressed tightly together. His arrogance had been shattered, his power stripped away. The crowd's silence was deafening, filled with the weight of justice served in the most elegant, powerful way imaginable. Naomi, calm and resolute, allowed herself a single, small smile. She looked at her daughter, who met her gaze with gratitude, awe, and newfound confidence. In that instant, the hall understood something profound. True power and respect are never dictated by wealth, status, or appearances. They are forged by integrity, courage, and the lives one chooses to lead. Marcus Whitfield was no longer a figure of authority or ridicule. He was exposed, humbled, and powerless. The women who had been mocked were now the center of honor. Naomi's identity, carefully hidden until this moment, had transformed the entire dynamic of the room. The stage was set for swift justice. Marcus would face consequences befitting his cruelty, and Naomi, Aisha, and Renee would finally receive the acknowledgement they deserved. The room was still buzzing, but now the energy had shifted completely. Where there had once been scorn, arrogance, and judgment, there was now silence, awe, and a sense of accountability. Marcus Whitfield, the man who had mocked, belittled, and attempted to assert dominance over Naomi, Aisha, and Renee, now stood exposed in front of every guest, powerless and humiliated. His usual smug expression had crumbled, replaced with a pale, twitching mask of fear and disbelief. Naomi, ever composed, allowed herself a slow, deliberate step forward. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to escalate. Her presence alone was authority enough. The guests, sensing the finality of what was about to unfold, instinctively fell silent. "Marcus," Naomi began, her voice steady, commanding, and impossible to ignore, "you have spent the last hour trying to assert power where none existed. You have humiliated guests, belittled family, and thought that arrogance could shield your ignorance. Today, you have learned the hard way that respect cannot be demanded. It is earned." The silence in the room was thick, almost tangible. Marcus's jaw trembled, his fists clenching at his sides. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He realized, perhaps too late, that every insult, every snide comment, every smirk aimed at these women was now his undoing. Daniel Whitfield stepped forward, placing a firm hand on his mother's shoulder. He turned to the wedding planner, who had been quietly observing the escalating tension. "Please ensure that Marcus is removed from this event immediately," Daniel said firmly. "He will not be allowed to continue disrupting what should be a day of love, respect, and celebration." Two staff members, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, approached Marcus. His protests were weak, incoherent, barely audible over the collective gasps of the guests. As he was gently escorted out, the weight of his humiliation was absolute. Every eye followed him, and the whispers of astonishment and admiration for Naomi and Aisha only grew louder. Once Marcus had been removed, Naomi turned her gaze back to the guests, her eyes softening. She allowed herself a small, genuine smile for the first time that day. "Let this be a lesson," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "Kindness, integrity, and courage matter far more than wealth, status, or appearances. Every action has consequences, and every life is valuable." Aisha, still shaking slightly from the intensity of the confrontation, stepped forward and hugged her mother tightly. "You were amazing," she whispered. "I've never been prouder." Naomi hugged her back, pressing a kiss to the top of her daughter's head. "And I am proud of you, Aisha. Today you saw what it means to stand tall, even when the world tries to tear you down. Never forget that." Renee, her voice cracking slightly with emotion, joined them. "I've always known you two were strong, but today the world finally sees it too." The three women stood together, united, their presence commanding admiration and respect. The guests, some still stunned, now approached with smiles and apologies, many expressing admiration for their courage and composure. One of the older female guests approached Naomi cautiously. I just want to say I am so sorry for what you endured. Your strength is incredible." Naomi nodded graciously. "Thank you, but strength isn't about proving people wrong. It's about staying true to yourself, no matter the circumstances." Even the wedding planner, who had initially been caught in the awkward tension, approached quietly. "Ma'am, I can't tell you how impressed I am. You handled everything with such dignity. The event, it will proceed beautifully now, thanks to your example." Naomi smiled, acknowledging the compliment. "Good. Let's make sure it's a celebration of love and family, as it should be." Daniel stepped closer to his mother and sisters, his eyes glistening with pride. "Today showed everyone here exactly who you are, Mom, and it's a reminder that character and courage always win over arrogance and cruelty." The family shared a quiet moment of victory. They had not only survived a public attack on their dignity, but had turned the situation into a display of honor, courage, and undeniable respect. Meanwhile, Marcus Whitfield's fate outside the wedding hall was swift and public. By the end of the day, word of his behavior had spread throughout the social circle. Friends and family distanced themselves from him. Several high-profile guests privately contacted Daniel to express shock and disappointment at Marcus's conduct. Rumors circulated that he would be formally reprimanded by the family and face professional consequences for his actions. His reputation, once a source of pride, was now tarnished beyond repair. Inside the hall, the wedding continued, now fully transformed. What had begun as a moment of humiliation for Naomi, Aisha, and Renee had become a testament to courage and dignity. The guests were attentive, respectful, and celebratory, many inspired by the display of composure and strength. As the reception progressed, Naomi found a quiet moment with Daniel. He took her hand, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for everything. For always showing me what it means to lead with honor, for always standing tall even when it was hard." Naomi squeezed his hand, her own eyes misting. "Daniel, you've always had it in you. Today, everyone else just finally saw it." Aisha joined them, wrapping her arms around both her mother and her uncle. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." "Yes," Naomi said, smiling. "Together." The evening continued, and the atmosphere had shifted completely from tension to joy. Laughter returned. Music played. The once judgmental crowd had transformed into an audience of admiration, many inspired to reflect on their own behavior. The power of truth, integrity, and dignity had triumphed. For Naomi, Aisha, and Renee, the day was more than a wedding. It was a validation of a lifetime of resilience. It was proof that even in the face of cruelty, the right combination of courage, honor, and dignity could turn humiliation into triumph. And as they danced, laughed, and celebrated, one truth resonated louder than any insult, rumor, or act of arrogance. Character always wins over cruelty. Respect once earned is untouchable. And those who judge others by appearances alone are doomed to be humbled by the truth. The confrontation had ended, justice had been served, and redemption had been earned. Marcus Whitfield was gone, his arrogance dismantled. Naomi and her family had reclaimed their dignity and honor, transforming what could have been a humiliating day into an unforgettable triumph. The stage was now set for the epilogue, the final chapter in which the audience could see how one day of courage forever changed lives, how the villains faced consequences, and how the heroes embraced their well-earned happiness. 1 year later, the memory of that day at the Whitfield wedding had transformed from a tense, humiliating ordeal into a defining moment of triumph and inspiration for Naomi, Aisha, and Renee. The family had moved forward, their lives richer, stronger, and filled with opportunities they had once only dreamed of. Naomi Carter now lived with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Her days were still busy, but they were filled with fulfillment rather than tension. She continued her work as a guidance counselor, but her reputation had grown. Colleagues, students, and parents alike spoke of her with respect, knowing her not just as a mentor but as someone who had demonstrated extraordinary courage and integrity. Invitations to speak at community events, schools, and military gatherings poured in, allowing her to share her story of resilience, dignity, and quiet leadership. Naomi, however, never sought the spotlight. She carried herself with humility, a reminder that true power needs no display. Aisha, who had once been nervous and unsure about attending that wedding, had blossomed into a confident, poised young woman. The experience had given her an unshakable sense of self-worth. She had been accepted into one of the top universities in the country and had started a leadership program for young women of color, mentoring them to face adversity with courage, just as she had witnessed her mother and aunt do. She often recounted the story of that wedding to her mentees, emphasizing the power of standing tall, even when others try to tear you down. Renee, who had always been protective of her sister and niece, had found new purpose in advocacy and public service. She had launched a small nonprofit to support young women navigating prejudice, mentorship, and societal expectations. Her work was informed by personal experience, and the story of the wedding became a central example of how dignity and integrity could triumph over cruelty. As for Marcus Whitfield, his fall from grace had been severe and public. Within months of the wedding, his arrogance and disrespect had led to estrangement from family members, professional setbacks, and social isolation. The incident had become a cautionary tale among social circles and the community, a stark reminder that cruelty and entitlement come with consequences. Though Marcus continued to live within the same city, he was a shadow of the man he had once been, his former arrogance replaced with bitter introspection. Daniel Whitfield, the groom, remained deeply grateful for his mother's presence in his life. The respect he held for Naomi and the values she instilled in him had only grown stronger. He often reflected on that wedding day as the pivotal moment that reinforced his principles, shaping the man he was becoming and the leader he aspired to be. The once oppressive wedding hall had become a symbol of victory. Where humiliation and mockery had reigned, courage, honor, and truth had emerged triumphant. Naomi and her family's story had quietly circulated among friends, colleagues, and extended family, inspiring others to stand up for themselves and confront prejudice without fear. On the anniversary of the wedding, Naomi, Aisha, and Renee sat together in their living room, reflecting on how much had changed in just 1 year. The three women shared a quiet, knowing smile, each acknowledging the strength, resilience, and courage that had carried them through. "Do you remember the exact moment he raised that hand?" Aisha asked softly, still shaking her head in awe. Naomi chuckled quietly. "I remember the entire room freezing." I'll never forget the look on his face, Marcus Whitfield realizing for the first time that he had no power over anyone here. Renee shook her head, still incredulous. "It's unbelievable how quickly everything can turn when truth meets arrogance." Naomi nodded. "Yes, and that's the lesson. Integrity, courage, and character matter more than anything else. They are the weapons that cruelty and entitlement can never overcome." Aisha leaned back in her chair, smiling with the kind of calm pride only lived experience can give. "And we proved it, not just for ourselves, but for everyone watching." Renee added, "Exactly. People may try to judge you by appearances, status, or background, but what really counts is how you carry yourself and how you treat others." The women shared a long, quiet laugh, the sound full of relief, triumph, and unspoken pride. They had weathered humiliation, faced prejudice head-on, and emerged not only victorious but stronger than ever. The moral of the story was clear. Appearances and status are fleeting. Arrogance and cruelty are eventually exposed. And those who act with dignity, courage, and honor, regardless of how the world perceives them, always prevail. Naomi and her family had become living proof that integrity and truth outshine all else, leaving a legacy of respect, inspiration, and empowerment. The camera might fade here, but the lesson lingers. Stand tall, speak truth, honor yourself and others. In the face of arrogance, never waver. Character is the ultimate victory. If Naomi, Aisha, and Renee's story inspired you today, take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of courage, resilience, and justice. Remember, even in the darkest moments, truth, dignity, and courage can turn humiliation into triumph. Stand tall and never let anyone define your worth.